And with that, I mean, the name of the panel is Taking Back the Media, embracing new media and using it to our advantage. I think everybody here is embracing the new media and trying to use it to our advantage. My problem, as I mentioned earlier, is I'm always a little early. I'm waiting for it to catch up. I believe it will. Part of it is, and I mean, I've met, well, Kim, again, who is now a listener, a 99er. Alec Lawson over there, who... Johnson, sorry. We mentioned Alec Lawson. Alec Johnson, who was a protester who got arrested in D.C. at the Keystone XL protest. You know, it's a two-way... You know, the thing I always like about radio, it's a very personal medium. I believe it's one-on-one. I think the internet can be that way too, and it is very interactive. But we need to show people who are maybe not as technically savvy as we are that they can listen really easily to radio online from anywhere and get all kinds of voices. Even if you're in Miami without a progressive talk station, you can still hear progressive talk. I mean, I hear calls to Thom's show, to Randy Rhodes' show, I guest host for her a lot, from South Florida. Well, obviously they're listening online or via XM. But that's how we take back the media. As Tim said, we need to occupy the internet. And I think we're doing a good job, but, you know, they're doing it too. I love Glenn Beck. I hear people talk all the time on TV. Well, Glenn Beck's gone. He's not on Fox anymore. But he moved online. He's still on radio, first of all, and don't discount the power of radio. But he moved his thing online because I think he sees the future too. With that, I want to open it up to you.
Yeah. You touched on it earlier, the idea of licensing and that the standards have been watered down. So these are public airways. Who could, you've been through it, the FCC licensing process I think has been diminished greatly. Who oversees that, and is there any possibility of putting some heat there on the fact that these are public airways where there's no longer any obligation to have, for example, discounts for campaign financing or public, or the kind of public surveying to find out what the issues are?
You can still challenge a radio station's license. You can go into your local radio station and demand to see their public file. And, they do have to keep these documents. If somebody writes the radio station complaint, they have to keep that stuff in the public file. A lot of radio stations just sort of, they don't bother with it anymore. You can be a real annoyance to your local right-wing radio station if you want to.
Well, you mentioned who controlled that process, and technically it's the Federal Communications Commission. Realistically, it's the Viacoms and the Clear Channels of the world who dictate policy to the Federal Communications Commission. But it used to be that every 2 years a station would have to renew its license. And it changed to 3 years. And it changed to 8 years.
What?
Yes, 8 years. And it's a process, it's a rubber stamp process for the most part. You fill out a postcard, send it in. And unless people organize and file what's called a petition to deny, the FCC will stamp it and send it back to you, and you've got another 8 years. So if you are upset about who owns your local stations, there are procedures. And I should mention, we didn't go into it, the owner of the airways has to behave in a legal manner. We're Free Press and a lot of other organizations that are here are looking at Rupert Murdoch and News Corp, which owns 27 local Fox affiliates, some of them are NBC, and saying, well, they haven't met that standard, and this 8-year cycle of renewals, if they break the law, if they behave in a way that's unbecoming of themselves, we have the right to actually petition them to deny those licenses immediately. So I would just encourage folks to get involved in that.
Can I speak to that?
Yeah.
Just very quickly, Nicole mentioned her experience in Miami. I was on your radio station in Miami, and we were pulling 4.5 and 5 shares, which is a BFD. In a city the size of Miami, that's $4 million in revenue. A share point's worth about $700,000 in a city that size. And when they dropped progressive programming and went to sports, they went to a 2 share and did management ever explain to you why they're more profitable?
Yes, because Clear Channel owns Fox Sports. They never explained it, but I know this. Fox Sports is not owned by Fox. It's owned by Premier Radio, which is owned by Clear Channel, and they needed a clearance in Miami. Because if they can show their advertisers on the network that they have a big major market clearance in Miami, they get to charge more. But you know what? 12 Plus, they have a 0.2 to 0.3. They never
So
get.
it's even worse.
It's even worse.
But here's how it works: is when a commercial radio station carries my show, they have to carry 5 network minutes that I sell and keep the money from, and then they sell 11 local minutes, 11, 14 local minutes that they keep the money from. There's no money that changes hands. It's a barter system. But if the radio station is owned by a company that, for example, owned my show, nobody does, but if they did, then they would get my minutes as well as their own minutes. And that's what happened in Miami to that station. Now, we used to have this problem in both the movie industry and the television industry. In the 30s, the movie industry, MGM had their own theaters and Warner had their own theaters, and they only showed their own movies. And Congress came in and said, this is illegal, and they broke that. And what it did was it busted up the studio system and opened up the whole movie industry. It was incredible. Television, the same thing. In the 1960s, late 1950s, early 1960s, Congress came in and said, you got 3 networks and they're producing all their own programming. That's illegal. They can't own their own programming. And when they busted that open, the first big company to come out of that was Mary Tyler Moore Enterprises. And Stephen J. Cannell with all the Hawaii Five-0 and all that stuff, and all these other shows, and now we've got all this diversity in television programming. Radio has never, the Congress has never said that who owns the programming can't own the retail outlets. And so you've got Rush Limbaugh working for Premier, and all of those national minutes that he owns, all the revenue from that, is being cycled by the same company that owns the local radio station. And so this is why you will never see an independent show on one of Clear Channel's 50,000 watt sticks, because they'll run their own shows. Right. And this is why, and they only syndicate one progressive show. And which is Randy. And so this has to be changed, in my opinion, and that's a point of entry if any of you are doing congressional activism, like Tim Carpenter's out there every, once a week, banging on doors about issues about healthcare and health warfare and things like that. But if any of you are doing activism around media, I see this as a real entry point. Also, a lot of this began with, as my wife says, I was going to say this on my gravestone, it all started with Reagan when he stopped enforcing the Sherman Act, and then
but it also Bill Clinton we have to blame also for the Telecommunications Act. Yeah.
I just want to follow up on a point that Tim Karr made. My name is Brandy Doyle. I'm the policy director at the Prometheus Radio Project. And the Local Community Radio Act that Tim mentioned is this major opportunity, I think, to build progressive media infrastructure. But it's coming up quickly. There's going to be an opportunity to apply for licenses as early as next summer. And they're scarce. There's not an infinite number of these licenses to go around. In the first round, a lot of the licenses for low-power stations were taken by very well-organized right-wing evangelical groups. So I think that for folks who want to challenge that and get organized also, now is the time. You can get in touch with us, you can get in touch with Free Press. And one thing to note about these stations that are different than the stations that the commercial stations, even the AM stations, they're much less expensive to build and operate. They're non-profit, non-commercial. The licenses themselves are free. Instead of it being hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, it's in the tens of thousands of dollars. So that means that a lot of times they're actually movement-based stations. They're stations run by nonprofit organizations that have a mission. If you all are familiar with the Coalition of Immokalee Workers and Farm Workers in Florida, they have a low-power station they use to organize workers in the fields. So this is something that you can get involved in, even if you have an organization that has a broader mission to invest in building media infrastructure for the long term. So
Great. And the website is
PrometheusRadio.org.
It's Prometheus Radio, PROMETHEUS Radio.org.
Okay.